Welcome everybody to this presentation from the Parent Education Series. My name is Charlene Margot and I'm the founder of the series and co-founder of the Parent Venture, our nonprofit organization. We could not be more delighted to have with us today Amanda LeBlanc from Rape Trauma Services, RTS. And we know with more than 125 of you registered that this is a very important and timely conversation. It probably could actually not be more timely than today based on yesterday's news. So we know that our kids have been home for a year and they have been in front of computers and screens and tablets and phones. And that is a great blessing, but with it comes some risk. So today we're really going to be talking about how do we keep our kids safe in an online world? What does that online culture look like? And how as you can a parent, how can you as a parent stay ahead of the curve and help keep your kids safe? So before I tell you a little bit about our presenter, I want to just give you a short rundown of how today is going to work. First of all, we will be offering the same event in Spanish on Thursday, April 22nd. Typically, we offer simultaneous Spanish interpretation, but RTS has been generous enough to offer this event in English and Spanish. So again, if you have Spanish-speaking friends or relatives, April 22nd at 5:30 p.m. Special thanks, as I mentioned today, to Amanda LeBlanc from RTS and our sponsors, Woodside PTSA, Sequoia Union High School District, Sequoia Healthcare District, Peninsula Healthcare District, and the Parent Venture. As always, we are grateful for your sponsorship. We would not be here without you. This is our 15th year offering events in the Sequoia Union High School District, but the program is growing, and we now serve families, students, and parents in more than 16 school districts. So thank you. Today, we will be having about 45 minutes of content that is teaching from Amanda. And then we want to save about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A from you, the audience. So tonight you'll see on the bottom of your Zoom screen, the chat button. You will see links in there from my partner, Bev Hartman, both for today's organization and other relevant links. So please talk to each other, talk to us using the chat button, but we'd like you to put your questions in the Q&A button. If you can, keep them short because we want to get to as many of your questions as we can. At the end, you'll see a survey link in this chat. We hope that you will take a minute to fill that out. We promise we read every one, and it helps us for planning future events and also with our grant funding. So thank you in advance for doing that. Today's event will be recorded and available on our video library. As I just told our keynote presenter today, we've had over 15,000 views on the video library, including 12,000 since COVID. So we know that these events are valuable to you, the parents, and appreciate the convenience of being able to watch when your schedule permits. Our next event is coming up next week on Wednesday, March 24th, with Dr. Anna Lemke from the Stanford University School of Medicine. This event is called The Neuroscience of Addiction, which is going to be amazing. And Dr. Lemke was recently featured in a documentary called The Social Dilemma that many of you saw. All right, time to tell you a little bit about today's keynote. Amanda LeBlanc is a lifelong advocate for survivors of sexual violence, a California state certified sexual assault counselor for 25 years. Amanda is the program director for Rape Trauma Services, a center for healing and violence prevention. A nonprofit Jill of all trades, Amanda holds a BA in liberal studies from Cal State Monterey Bay. An exhausted mom, there's an honest comment, of 2 teen boys and a daughter in kindergarten. She brings a mix of both professional and personal experience to the intervention and prevention of violence. Please join me in a really warm virtual welcome for today's presenter, Amanda LeBlanc. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Bev, and thank you so much for everyone to be here. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to see that just worked. So I'm hoping everybody can see. Okay, great. So my name is Amanda. I am the program director for Rape Trauma Services. We are San Mateo County's Rape Crisis Center. And we're going to talk a little bit today about some of our services, but also really about the online world. And we're going to think back. We're going to start by thinking a little bit about what we were like as teenagers. And I know for some of us that feels a really long time ago, but let's think about kind of our behaviors. And I just want to reiterate what Charlene said. which is that the impacts of COVID have made both the dangers and the sweetness, I should say, of online activity, both for adults and kids. It's just really increased everything that we're seeing. And all of the statistics on this slide, and we will share the slides after the presentation as well. But all of the statistics on these slides are pre-COVID. And what we are hearing from online watch groups and from our partners, including law enforcement, is that we are seeing a huge rise in child abuse images and in cyberbullying and sexting during COVID. And there are some really common sense reasons for that we're going to be talking about. But I wanted you to know that COVID has, as all of our lives have moved online, a lot of the sort of harm reduction models that we used to talk about a year ago are really difficult now, because we really don't get the chance to interact as in person, right? So, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right. So just so you know that COVID has absolutely impacted us. So what are we going to do today? Well, we're going to talk about online news culture, and some of that is shocking, and some of it makes me uncomfortable as a person. It makes me really uncomfortable as a mom, and that's okay, because we need to speak about the unspeakable, and that's part of prevention of violence. And so we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to help you with some tools, and we're going to be talking about expectations, right? And one thing you're going to hear from me over and over again today is that when we know better, we do better. And it's never too late to set up expectations. And we're also going to explore some skills and resources, and to really think about kind of what does my kid have access to? And I can tell you that I've been through this presentation many times, and it is still shocking to me every time I see the slides. So you and we will be in the same boat, so to speak, as we go. All right. So let's talk about the teenage brain, our teenagers' brains. We know from neuroscience research that the brain is not completely formed until about the age of 25. And that some of the things that are last to develop are long-term consequence thinking, and also really being able to critically think about our actions, right? And so I want to start just by everyone thinking about, when you were a teenager, did you ever do anything that you didn't want your parents to know? Pretty much all of us. Did you ever lie about something that you did so that you wouldn't get in trouble? Probably yes. And did you ever roll your eyes when a grown-up wanted to talk to you about something that, in hindsight, as a grown-up, you can be like, yeah, that was really important? Yeah, probably most of us. And so I want us to understand that although the technology that teenagers use has changed, their brains have not. And so all of the things that I just said about, keeping secrets and doing things that we wouldn't think are smart, all of those things are still things that teenagers do, and they're still the basis for a lot of their decision making, including online. And so we're going to be talking about how that plays out as we go forward. Okay, so let's get into this. So cyberbullying. Just because we're not in person doesn't mean that we can't be disrespectful and or mean to each other. And certainly this is not specific to teens. It's also for adults. But for today, we're going to be talking about youth. And so what we know is that according to the Pew Research Survey, 59% of children have experienced cyberbullying, and that's horrifying. And it can take many different forms, and it can be done on many different platforms, and we're going to talk about that. So what we're talking about here is name calling, rumors, receiving images, physical threats, or the sharing of images. And so we know that this is something that a lot of kids experience. And what we want is to take a look at some of these apps. We're going to be going through the apps again at the end and talking about some resources around them. But my guess is that you probably have at least experience with some of these apps, right? Maybe Instagram or Twitter, and or have seen them before. So this is just some of the apps. Really what we're talking about is ease of access, right? So when a child has access to other kids, they sometimes may act out. And that doesn't mean that your child is a bad child by any means. We would never say that. It just means that maybe the anonymity and the group think and the peer pressure may have gotten to them, and maybe they did something that they regret, and certainly that you would be disappointed in. The issue that we need to talk about is that we need to explain our expectations to our kids so that they understand that that's not acceptable behavior. And what do they think is bullying? I can tell you from my own experience as a mom of 2 teenage boys, when I overhear my son talking to his friends, first of all, I don't really understand some of the words that they're using, but the ones that I do, I'm not thrilled about. And so it's a constant conversation, about, I heard you use that word, and do you know what it means? Do you understand what the context is? Do you understand why I'm uncomfortable? And I'm going to ask you not to use those words again. Something like that. And what we want is to have clear boundaries, right? So if you have a young child, like, either in upper elementary school or in middle school, I would say that they can only use chat technologies when you are there. You should have all passwords and all accounts. And you can certainly ask your children to friend you on those platforms. And this is really about vigilance, and it's about vigilance in your expectations. It's about vigilance with your kids. And it's also about understanding and, giving them space and then pulling it back when necessary. So what we want people to understand is that cyberbullying is not just words, that it is, even if it is just words, so to speak, that they have an impact. And we know that COVID-19 has created this immense, intense isolation, and that we are all feeling lonelier than we have probably in the real world. And that even if we don't feel good about ourselves, we can't make someone else feel bad about themselves, right? So some of the warning signs here. This does not mean that your child is being cyberbullied and or that they are bullying someone else. But I would say as a parent, if I'm noticing any of these behaviors in my kid, it's time to ask some questions and see what happens. And the other thing that I will say about all of these conversations and our conversation guides, which will be coming out, we'll be sending after, the thing that I want to say about that is that this is not going to be one conversation. This is going to be lots of little conversations, lots of probably conversations where you learn things that maybe you're not thrilled about, and both of you need to take a break and then come together. And so we understand that these are difficult conversations to have, And you shouldn't set your expectations that you're going to cover cyberbullying and sexting and pornography all in one conversation, right? We want you to listen to what your child has to say, hear them listen to you, and then come back. Okay, so let's talk. And again, the slides will come out as well, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end. Okay, let's go forward. Forward. Let's try that. Okay, sexting. Sending sexual images, photos, or videos through the use of technology. This has been one of the biggest increases that we have seen in COVID. And there's a reason for this, right? Because relationships usually or sometimes begin in person. You get to know someone, you have classes with them, something like that. And it's something that kids have now missed for over a year. And I have a senior in high school. He has a long-term girlfriend, and they have seen each other maybe 6 times in this year. And as the time went on, and I know how much they, like each other and want to be together, it was one of the first times that I really had to have a conversation about images. And it's not the first time that we've had it. I remember a few years ago, this was probably 4 years ago now, my son came up to me and he said, "Mom, I have a girlfriend." And I was like, "Oh, well, who is she? She go to your school?" And he was like, "No, she lives in Virginia." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he said, "She's sending me pictures." And being the mom that I am and doing what I do for a living, I was like, "I need you to show me those pictures. And I'm really hoping that they are of her face." And he was like, "Yes, of her face." And I had to have a conversation about that. It's not okay to send pictures. Even though I know that it seems normative, that it is almost an expectation in youth dating, that my beliefs about body autonomy and respect and other things mean that I am going to say, no, you may not send pictures of your body to someone else. And if you get one, I need to know about it immediately. That's the expectation that I set in my house. And does that mean that they followed through? It's the best that I can do, right? He's now 17, but what I want him to know is that I have that expectation, and so there are consequences if that expectation is not met. And so these statistics are alarming, right? 30% of high school students have sexted, meaning they have either sent a picture or received a picture, and 45 have received a nude. And that is shocking. And it is something that I think we need to be clear about, both our own either moral or what our own thoughts and feelings are, but also there is a legal aspect to this as well, right? And here are some apps that are commonly used for sexting. So I would say that probably the ones that are most often recognized by adults are Instagram and Snapchat. But all of these apps can be used. And WhatsApp is actually one of the most used texting apps. And we actually use it for telemedicine as well. Okay, so used for apps. Let's go to the next slide and see what we've got here. So let's talk about sexting. What is the truth about sexting? Oops, sorry. Let's do that again. One really important aspect of this is that 50% of sexting is motivated by coercion. And in this in this topic specifically, coercion, we mean peer pressure. Someone is asked and asked and asked or pressured to send a picture. And we know that peer support is one of the most important supports during adolescence. We know that it can be really difficult to go against the crowd and to not do something when being asked. And we also know that there is some manipulation in that from other teens and certainly from adults. So let's talk a little bit about this. So images on the internet last forever. And even if an image isn't shared by your child, meaning that they send it to someone who maybe they're in a relationship with, and then that person shares it, one of the things that we have seen is that then it gets shared, it gets posted, and it's almost impossible to get removed from everywhere that it has been. And that is a really difficult long-term consequence that is really hard for teenagers. And it is specifically really hard because there's a really fine line that we all walk, right? About having life experience and wisdom and understanding in hindsight what teen relationships were like, right? There are lots of people who met, fell in love, and stayed in love in high school. I have lots of, in fact, almost all of my aunts and uncles met at Woodside High School, fell in love at Woodside High School, and they're still married 50 years later. That is, unfortunately, the exception and not the rule. And sometimes we believe that our relationships will last forever or that we can absolutely trust someone. And part of our learning is that we were wrong, that this person isn't the person that we could trust. And that betrayal of trust, at least when I was growing up and the internet really wasn't part of that, was maybe a rumor, or maybe you lost a friend. Certainly it wasn't a lifelong consequence of a part of my body being on the internet forever. And so it's really important to talk to your child and to really express to them what your expectations are around sexting, of sending of pictures, of sharing pictures if they do get them. And also for them to understand that every single image of any sexual, of a sexual nature is child pornography. And that these are cases that are actively being prosecuted by the district attorney's office. And they take it seriously because of the long-term consequence, because we know that there are people who have engaged in self-harm or even attempted or completed suicide because of the ramifications of this behavior. And it's really important to understand that if your child receives something that they didn't ask for, that you know about it immediately. And if it comes from a schoolmate, absolutely get the school involved, because they need to know that this is happening and they can help. As can RTS. We advocate for parents and children who this has happened to all the time. We work with law enforcement, we work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and we are happy to help if you are in this situation. The easiest way to not be in this situation is to not share pictures, to not take them, to not have them, and to not share them. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. Pornography. Still or moving pictures of sexual acts. This is difficult to talk about, and I really do get that. And I know that for a lot of families, it's easier to talk about cyberbullying. It's easier even to talk about sexting than it is to talk about pornography. And the message that I want to make clear today is that if you aren't talking to your kids about pornography, someone else might be. And what we know in this first bullet here is that 70% of children ages 7 to 18 have accidentally encountered online pornography. And I don't know about you guys, but I have certainly had experiences in my life where I was looking for something and all of a sudden something popped up and I was like, oh, that's porn. And kids are curious. There is a natural curiosity, especially about sex, and especially about sex if we're not talking to them about sex and they don't understand what it is. And so they may click through, and once you click through, your recommendations will come up with more. And it's not just things that we think pornography would be related to. My mom was an 8th grade science teacher for many years, and one of the first years that she had the internet in her classroom, she decided that she was going to do a search for the moons of Jupiter. Moons of Jupiter is what she put in. And she thought, oh, I'm going to show them how to do a search and how to get to a really quality source. And the filters were not very good yet for her school district. And accidental things happened. And she kind of had to shut everything down and start again. And she learned a very, very good lesson, which is always Google and get what you want up before you share it with your children. And that happens to kids too, right? We all use the internet for research for everything. And in fact, your class assignments might be to go and put something into a search engine and then find it. And so it can be accidental. We also know that watching pornography is stimulating. And so we know that both girls and boys are aware of the overwhelming abundance of free pornography and that they might be using it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the apps that are commonly linked with pornography. A few of these I got to learn about, and a few of them are just straight up porn sites. Like there's really no other use or forum for them, right? But a lot of them are what are called chat bots, which I just learned about. And those are, so Chatrulika is one of those. I'm not sure I said that correctly now that I'm thinking about it, but the blue one up there, it is chat roulette. And so basically it is just you get on the you get on the app and it just sends you to chat with a stranger. And that stranger may not have any clothes on, and that stranger may be engaging in a sexual act. So these are all sites that I would say, and I think out of all of these, Twitter is the one that surprised me the most because, you know, I know that almost everybody I know has a Twitter account. Even if they don't post, they scroll, they read, it's where news breaks. But there is pornography on Twitter. There are pictures. So let's keep moving because I have lots more to say about that. Ease and accessibility. We know that it's easy to get, it's free, and there are lots of dangers with child pornography. There are lots of dangers with pornography. And, you know, I'm not here to judge what adults do. I'm not here to judge, what two consenting adults want to do in their own lives. But for kids, it's really dangerous. And one of the reasons is because it sets up false expectations of both sex of sex, of intimacy, of relationships. There is very little talk about consent. There is very little talk about protection. There's very little talk about consequences. And it doesn't even show relationships. And so if the only way that children are learning about pornography, about sex, is through pornography, studies have found that they will be much more aggressive with even what would be a consensual partner. And also that they have complete misunderstandings of sexual acts. And one thing that we all need to know about mainstream pornography is that even if consent is talked about, there is a pretty fair chance that you are viewing images of human trafficking, and that may be a child or an adult who is being forced to do this to make money for someone else. And there is literally no way to know if it is human trafficking or not. And so it's important to take first steps, take deep breaths, and to get into this with your kids. And one of the most disturbing things that I have heard about teenage behavior with pornography is that kids will put on, so I don't know about you, but I've been on a lot of high school campuses and in the world with teenagers and even adults, almost everyone now has earbuds in all the time. And those earbuds, I assume, are music. I listen to music and sometimes I listen to books, right? But I was talking to my sons about this and they were saying, no, Mom, they're listening to porn. And I was like, sorry, what? They're listening to pornography. And what struck me about that is that if those sounds and words are just background noise for our young kids, it's not being used for its initial purpose, but also that's a really, really dangerous thing to carry around with you all day. And I think that it is okay for us as parents to say to our children that I do not expect that you will access pornography or that you will have it on at school during your school day. And again, if you're not talking about this, your kid is probably finding it even accidentally and probably following their curiosity. And so it's important to have the conversations. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the next step in this, right? So cyberbullying and sexting can be youth to youth, but what we know about COVID is that the grooming behaviors that used to take place in person are now taking place online, and that adults are looking for children to exploit on the internet, and they are doing this in lots of different ways. So they are doing it through social media, they're doing it through game consoles, they are, and the most striking statistic for me on this page is the third bullet. 69% of teens regularly receive online communication from strangers and don't tell a parent or caretaker. Ooh, that's concerning. It's concerning because we want our kids to be safe. It's concerning because we don't always, sometimes they know these apps better than we do. And so we trust that our expectations are being met. And also, sometimes children believe that they are talking to another child and it is actually an adult. And so let's talk about some of, oh, excuse me, go back. Let's talk about how this can happen. So this is a map of San Mateo County, which is where RTS lives and works. And these are the cities in San Mateo County where we have, and law enforcement has, investigated active cases of child sexual exploitation. And almost all of these cases began with an adult reaching out online. And here are some of the apps that they use. You'll notice again, Snapchat, Instagram. We're going to get to those a little bit more. So how do you keep your kids safe online, right? You can discuss chat expectations. You can ask your kids to do some critical thinking and investigating when they get a friend request. The thing that I like in this most too is when I was a child, we had a conversation in my house about answering the phone or answering the door, and what we told, right? What we told people. We didn't tell people what our name was, what our school was, any of those things. And that is exactly the conversation that we need to be having with our kids about being online. And I will say that as a prevention educator, for 25 years, we've tried to get away from the paradigm of stranger danger. Most child sexual abuse is committed by someone that the child knows. And this, COVID specifically, but the online world has forced us to go back to that stranger danger paradigm, right? Don't go near the man in the scary van. Don't, if someone says, I have a puppy, do you want to look at it? Whether that's online or it's in person, the answer is no. And so we have to go back to those conversations. We have to reset our privacy, and we have to talk to our kids about the fact that I understand that their lives are online, that they live online, and that there isn't really such a thing as privacy for them online, but that your job is to keep them safe. And so in order to do that, there needs to be rules and they need to be followed. One of the most insidious ways that this happens is grown-ups will often buy a child credits on a game. Club Penguin, for example, Fortnite, Minecraft, anything that runs on Steam. They might just put money into an account. And if you don't know that what your child's login is or anything, they might never tell you. And that is grooming, classic grooming. That is an adult. Adults don't usually, and I will say this and it's going to sound harsh and I don't mean it this way, but strangers don't give children things without wanting something in return. And whether that is a picture or just talking to them, that's not acceptable. And the adults who do that are wrong. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about applications and platforms. If you're not horrified yet, put on your hat because here we go. All right. Social media. All of these apps have chat functions or friend functions. And almost all of them, if you have an account without privacy settings, anyone can poke or like or direct message a child. And what we know is that people who want to exploit children or hurt children are very patient and will continually reach out to many, many children until they get something back from them, and then they're hooked. And we have seen exploitation happen very quickly and escalate very quickly from these social media apps. They also all have GPS. You can search by proximity. You can search by school. And so it's really important to be active in your child's social media, that you're monitoring the usage, and also that you are familiarizing yourself and doing the research to find out how to make it as private as possible. Okay. When my kids first got on Twitter, I had, it was actually only on my phone. And so we would sit together and I would go through their friend requests with them. And we did this for years. And I have to say that it did not make my child happy. They did not love it. They did not love me at the time. And that's okay, because I know that these platforms can be dangerous. All right, so let's talk about age verification, because we hear a lot about this, like, it's like, yeah, but you have to be 18 to get on there. So really, age verification is about math. And you only have to verify your age once, and there's no proof that is requested. And so, for example, here on Instagram, add your birthday. Next, that's all that happens. That's the age verification. And so we know that these platforms and apps are set up to be for adults, but we know that kids are using them. And so the age verification is a step, but it's certainly not keeping kids from these apps. All right, so let's talk about dating and matching apps. So I understand that some of these apps are used for other things, like chatting. My personal guideline for my children around this is that you may not have these. If someone wants to talk to you through these apps, that concerns me. And so since it concerns me, and I know that these apps are used for dating and matching, you can't have them. And you can find another way. You can find something else that has something different if you want to talk to a person, but you may not have these on your phone. Okay, that's our rule. So a lot of these are used for kids, and they're messaging and video chat, and then others are streaming. And so, for example, Discord, I know, is very popular. My son is a gamer, and he's always on Discord. And that's where you can play a game live with other people. And playing a game live with other people means that you are really opening yourself up to the internet. And there are certain settings that you can do, but they can come in, they can play with you, they can chat, right? There's a certain amount of talking that happens in these games. And so if your kids are on any of these platforms and they're chatting, then that probably means that anyone can chat with them. So they can be matched with strangers, they can be asked to send pictures, videos from these apps, and there are games within these apps where they may also need or want money in order to, get to the next level, so to speak. So again, same expectations. Your kids need to have expectations of what you think they should be doing and not doing. You need to review those as kids get older. You need to be involved. And you need to have an expectation that you will have the login information and the password information for every single account that they have. Okay. All right, let's talk a little bit about open forums. So these are anonymous open forums where people often, so it's completely anonymous. They can post anything they want, and we mean anything. And there's really no guidelines about whether you're a child or a kid, and you can log on to any of these platforms and very, very quickly be exposed to someone who's interested in child pornography or other violence, including some videos around even death. And so it's really important, again, be involved, know what's happening, and limit their access. And this is not to say that all of this information is bad. I don't want anyone to think that. Not all of the information is bad, but it is concerning, just like anything else would be, right? Even if you thought that a TV show was too violent or something like that, right? You might go to it first and you might see what it's like. And I think that's a really good rule as well, to go there and really just talk to, explore it yourself, get an account, see what happens. And it's okay to say no. All right, so video game consoles. I don't know about you, but in my house, we talk about video games a lot more than I think that I would like to. And almost all of these have chat functions. And the higher you get in the game, and the more you chat and connect with friends and strangers, there is opportunity for grooming behaviors, for cyberbullying, and certainly for links to be given to pornography. And so if you have video game consoles that are connected to the internet, then all of these things apply. All of these dangers. And of course, it's fun, right? Like my children spend a lot of time gaming. But we set expectations when they were little, about chatting, about having accounts, those sorts of things. And we kind of grew as they grew. And all of that may lessen the risk for us and our kids. All right, so the last thing that is like on our slope downhill before I give you some resources. So these are really important things to know, and that is that these apps are for hiding pictures, for hiding videos, and you can also, I believe, hide other apps in these apps. And so the one that struck me the most as a parent and as someone who uses a calculator quite regularly was the calculator pound. And that because I would, if I was looking through my kid's phone, scrolling through it, I might not even see the pound and I'd be like, oh, you got a calculator, I have a calculator. And so that is meant to hide. And so if you see any of these on your child's phone, it's really important to just delete them. And again, setting the expectation is the best way to do that. Okay, so adult content websites. These are porn sites. There's just no two ways about it. And although they can be used for other chat functions, these are also on my list of no, you may not have these. And I don't want to see them in your browsing history, and I don't want you going anywhere near them. And so these are all adult websites. And again, once you're an adult, I'm not going to make any judgments, but for kids, not safe. All right, I see that we're getting questions. And so I'm hoping that these last slides really help us with that. So let me just tell you a little bit about these. So this is parental control software. And I would recommend that you research these, that you find out the one that is most, that meets your needs the best. There's also a great website about all of this, commonsensemedia.org. I know, and so I would absolutely, if you have a question, commonsensemedia.org would be the first place that I would go. So shout out to Common Sense Media, thank you. But these are all places that you can make decisions and enforce them. Now, when I started doing this 25 years ago, we used to tell parents, don't let your kids put on the parental control software. And I would still say that. So put it on, learn about it, and you need to make those decisions. So this is a start of something that you could do. And I would do this on all devices that you can. Okay, so you didn't have to write down all of that information because we are going to send you these guides. And we're going to send you all of the different apps, what they do, how they do it. and what to be aware of. We know that some of these apps, it's almost impossible to not use. For example, YouTube. Kids are told by teachers, by their school, to go to YouTube to watch a video, right? Even my kindergartner, she goes to YouTube and she watches books being read or books that are animated. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't have access to any of them, or that really, if you're going to be online, that you can't. But we need to know what's happening, and we need to be part of that experience as much as possible. Okay. All right. So we're going to give you the resource guides. What happened? Let's see. All right. And some other parent resources, which again will be on your sheets, but it's got some websites for you, some crisis lines, and RTS is here to help. If you would like to book a consultation with us to talk through this in your specific family, or if you feel like your child may have already experienced these things and you'd like to talk it through, or talk to us about our counseling program, please do that. We are happy to do that. You can reach out through education@rapetraumaservices.org, or you can reach out directly to me, Amanda@rapetraumaservices.org. Let me give you our 24-hour crisis line. Oh, and now that I've told you all of these horrible things about apps, we can be a resource for you. Please follow us and keep in touch. We post quite regularly, and a lot of it is information about things like this. So I hope that you will join us. And Charlene, that is the end of the presentation. I'm handing it back to you.
Well, thank you, Amanda. That was, I do this for a living, and that was pretty eye-opening. So everybody, we're going to take a deep breath and take some questions from you, the audience. And as Amanda generously mentioned, we will be sending these slides out along with her handouts, which are incredibly useful. I believe that RTS actually received a grant to prepare these parent information sessions this spring. So we're really lucky to be bringing this to you. Came to my attention through Vice Principal Chuck Velskow at Woodside High School. Amanda, are you actually a Woodside grad?
I am not a Woodside grad, but I have cousins who are, my mom and my dad, and my sons. So they're third generation legacy.
There you go. That? Very local girl. And also I want to let you know that Amanda really knows her stuff. I met her through the Human Trafficking Coalition work in San Mateo County. Yeah. And she and her organization really do the hard things. They're the ones that meet someone who may have been a victim of trafficking. They go to the hospital if somebody has been the victim of sexual abuse or assault. So thank you, Amanda, for the hard work you do and for being with us today. Let's start easy, okay?
Oh, okay, yes.
Here are a couple of factual questions I want to get out of the way first.
Yep.
Do you let your kids send pictures of their faces? You mentioned you don't let them send pictures of their body parts.
I do, but mostly because yes, I do. And I have to say that is trust, right? That was built up, because it used to be that it was like, okay, take a selfie. I'm going to watch you send it. Right. And then, if it comes in, I'm going to trust. If something else comes in from someone else, I'm going to trust that you're going to tell me about it. Yeah. And all of that. So yes, I do. And I have to say that when I say that, it makes my tummy hurt a little bit, but I think that, I have to let them fly a little bit, and especially because my sons are now 17 and 15, and, the real world is coming. And so I don't want them to go out with no information.
Yeah. And also, as much as we trust our kids, they say things. Yep. I remember 10 years ago when my daughter was in high school and saying to her, I've heard about sexting. She's like, kids don't do that, Mom. Well, they do. They do. They do. They do. So, and now we know. All right. Amanda, what percentage of teenage girls are exposed to pornography early? You mentioned statistics for boys, but what are the stats for girls?
So stats for girls are actually really difficult to find. My assumption and RTS's assumption is that it's pretty similar. That girls search the internet as commonly as boys do. That certainly that accidental finding of pornography is probably the same. And we don't, I think that we often underestimate that girls have sexuality and that they're curious and that they want to learn, and also that the people around them might be talking about it. And so I would say that it's probably pretty similar, and just as harmful, to it's, a lot of the mainstream pornography is very heteronormative, and again, can be incredibly violent, and it's just not a great way to learn about healthy relationships.
Really well said. So this is, I think I'm just going to mention this comment that came in from a parent because it's relevant to that. She says, unfortunately, my son got exposed to porn through a kind of cartoon that's mature anime. He was only in the
Yes.
5th grade, and he ended up developing a hardcore addiction to pornography. He's now 20 and breaking the cycle, but it has been hard for him to form healthy relationships.
Absolutely.
So
And
an accidental exposure, 5th grade.
Yep. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that, we need to break down the stigma of this because it is so common, and to understand that anything can become addictive, and certainly things that are stimulating to the brain are going to even become more addictive. And so my heart goes out to you and your family and to your son, and congratulations on confronting it. I think that's really, thank you for sharing.
Exactly. Brave thing to share. So here is a parent asking about blocking kind of control software. She says, I tried blocking porn and adult websites on my 13-year-old, but Apple has a thing on the phones that after a certain age, you can't completely block.
Yes.
You still have access. Can you comment on that?
I don't know anything specifically about Apple phones, but I will say that there are really incredible laws in California, at least, that outline that kids over the age of 12 get to make some of their own decisions about healthcare and other things. And so that may have something to do with it, because it may be that we can't restrict their access to healthcare. That's my best guess. I don't know anything about that, but I will write it down, and thank you for mentioning it, because I will absolutely look into it, and we will add a slide about it. So thank you.
All right. So here's the $1 million question, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
What age do you recommend parents give their kids their first smartphone?
Well, if I knew that,
$1 million.
Dollars. I don't know. And I don't think that anyone can tell you that. I think that you as a parent have to think about the risk versus reward. And you have to do all that you can to protect your kids. You have to set expectations with them. You have to be clear about those expectations. You have to be hyper vigilant about whether or not those expectations are followed. And I can tell you, in my house, we began with a flip phone, and I mean like an embarrassing Go phone, and I almost got him like a bumblebee phone that was, it could call 4 numbers and I knew what all those numbers were. And he, and then we built trust on that, and the trust is not just, you're not going to use it for other purposes, but you answer it when I call or I take it back, that it's mine. Right? I'm letting you use this phone. It's a privilege, but I own it. I pay for it. And so I am entitled to all of the information on it. And also that, that it is a privilege that can be taken away, and, and that we need to be comfortable in our role as parents to, just because a kid wants it so much doesn't mean that they get to have it.
But now, Amanda, we have the pandemic problem where
yes,
parents are being told, don't take away their kids' phones, because then you're taking away their friend group. That is a tricky one.
It is a tricky one. And I struggle with it myself. I'm also from, my kids are, they have a divorced household, and so that's like their lifeline to their other parent as well.
Yeah.
But I have a phone that I can let them use for anything that is necessary, including talking to other people. And frankly, if they are misusing their phone, then part of the consequence is not having access to those friends, right? You got to hang out with your mom. And that's probably the worst thing for teenagers. a worse consequence. And keep in mind that just because friends are online and there is a pandemic does not mean that we can't have expectations.
Absolutely. So I want to be respectful of those of you who may just have had an hour today. We're going to say thank you for coming and really appreciate you spending an hour with us. So if you need to go now, we understand. We have a couple more really good questions coming in.
Okay.
Amanda has generously said she'll stay on for a few more minutes. So stay with us if you can. And if not, again, thank you for coming today. This video will be on our video library. I'm sure it'll be a very popular and most viewed one. Okay, here's a great question for anybody who has a child who's a gamer.
Mm-hmm.
My son has befriended new gamer friends during COVID. How do you know for sure that the other friend is legitimately my son's age, like a teenager? He says he sees photos of the kid on Instagram, etc. Do you allow your boys to game with teens they don't personally know?
So I do now. And the reason why I do that, so again, it was, setting an expectation, first no chatting, then only chatting with people they knew in real life, right? IRL. So, only their school friends, and then it grew. And the answer to the first question is there's really, unless you know that person in real life, there is no way to know that that is another youth. There is absolutely no way to ensure that they are the child's age, that they're the gender that they say. There's just not. And so you have to take a leap of faith. And more importantly, is to have an expectation, and also for your children to trust you enough to be able to come to you if something happens. So the expectation with my kids now is that if a stranger asks you for anything, get off the game. Right? So if it's asked for a picture, if they want to send you money, if they want to chat, in a text app, if they want your logins for other things, the answer is no. And I do go into their games sometimes, which they don't love, I'll just say. But I will show up and I will say, who is that? And, oh, you're talking to that person, or, oh, I don't like the language of that person. And, even though my kids are now, older teenagers, I still have a responsibility to ensure their safety. And so, since I do this for a living, I'm a little bit psychotic about it, but also it's important to keep them, it's important to me to keep them safe.
All right, good, really good point. So here is a parent that's suggesting that if the look of the phone is important and peer pressure is a factor, and it is, she says, my husband told me about these phones that look like a smartphone, but they're actually only phones that receive calls and texts. I don't want parents to get overly paranoid, but I do want you to be cautious and to follow the advice that Amanda's giving today. Our good friend, Devorah Heitner, for example, author of Screenwise, she's an expert on digital media. That's a great book. She starts out her kids with phones that will only text, and they learn how to text. We don't give our kids cars and say, go drive.
Right.
These are all skills that need to be learned. And as Amanda said, you can grow with your kids, and every family has a different comfort level with blocking software, filtering, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know your kid best. So, consult anybody that you think is worthwhile and then make a decision. And, and I think it's okay to be honest with your kids that, like, we're going to try this and we actually don't know whether or not it's going to work and how we're going to feel about this. So, we're going to learn with you, and we're probably going to make some mistakes, but I'm going to trust that you're going to tell me when things happen that don't align with our family's values.
Exactly. So here's a family question that may even apply in your house. My older child, a teen, has been talking to the younger kids about what he's learned from friends and on the internet.
Oh boy.
I'm not sure his information is very accurate about sex and sexual development. How should
Yep.
I address that?
Yeah. So I think that, let's see, what would I do? So I think that I would pull my older child aside and say, I really want to thank you for opening up the conversation with your siblings about this. And, to me, that means that it's really important to you that they are safe, and I appreciate that. I'm kind of wondering, where did you hear these things? What did you learn? And to correct the misunderstandings, and then to let your children know, all of them, that if they have questions, that sometimes you need to talk to a grown-up, and this is one of those super important times. And that getting information from another child is probably not a good source because they don't have access to the information that we do as grown-ups. And so there are certain things that grown-ups need to get involved in, and this is one of them. And so you don't want to shame your child, right, for talking about it. You don't want your other kids to, not be able to have conversations, but you do want to set some expectations that at least you're part of it and that you can correct what you hear that's not aligned to what you want to say.
All right, thank you. That's a great answer. We always recommend being as transparent with your kids as you can and involving them in any conversation, even if you're uncomfortable. You can say, this conversation makes me uncomfortable, but we're going to get better. We're going to get better. And the first conversation may be 30 seconds, kind of just run and go.
Yep, exactly.
All right.
Run, go, cry, and then come back later and try again. Yes.
Exactly. So here's one of those questions. As parents, we're taught to tell our kids, we're always here if you want to talk. But I was brought up in a home where we didn't talk about sex. How can I be available for my kids, even if the subject is really difficult for me?
Yeah. So I would say that, I would, so that's one of the reasons why we created the awareness guides and the conversation guides that you're going to get sent. And that is actually like how to ask a question and how to hear an answer. And so I would absolutely use those. Something that my family did was, we had different people that we went to for different things. So if you have another adult in your life who is more open about these things, if you could have a pre-conversation with them, and then maybe, they talk to your child at first and you trust them and all of those things, then maybe, they have the first conversation and then maybe you do the follow-up conversation, but parenting is difficult. It is ugly on a regular basis. And it's okay to not do it right, but it's more important that you try. And even if years later, you and your kid look back on it and you're like, yeah, that was awful. That was so awkward, so uncomfortable. At least you know that you've started the conversation, and you can also find really good resources for them that align to your family values, and you can share those with them as well.
Really true. Our friend Vanessa Kellum from Health Connected, I know you know Amanda, says parents can also buy yourself some time. If your child asks a question, you can say, that's a really good question, and I'm going to look into that and get back to you. Do get back to them, but you are allowed to take the scary look off your face and just say, really good question, I will get back to you, right?
Yeah. And I did that actually with my kids. I remember somebody asked me where babies come from, and I was like, well, a sperm and an egg meet, and when you're 10, you can ask me again. That's as much information as you get.
Oh my gosh. Oh, last one here. This is a question I think that is on a lot of people's minds. Parent says, I'm concerned that the pandemic has delayed my teen's ability to form relationships, whether just friendly or romantic. By the time they get back to school, it'll be like 18 months. Will they be able to pick back up where they left off?
Yeah, I think such a good question, and it's so hard. And I think what's hardest about all of this, I think, is the unknown. We really, I think as parents, we knew the path that our kids were on and we understood what the next steps were, and now we really don't. And that is exhausting. But I believe very strongly, and RTS believes very strongly in resiliency. And in, when it is safe to have conversations again about the things that we thought would be normal and are not, and to encourage them to reach back out to the people that maybe they haven't been able to see, and to reestablish those in-person relationships. And I think it's going to be on us as parents and community members to be proactive in that outreach and to help our children figure out how to navigate in this new world, and to align our fears about everything, including that question, with the hopefulness that we can get through it.
I think that's beautiful. My last question is usually what gives you hope, but you really just answered that, Amanda.
Yeah.
That gives
Yes.
us hope, right? So again, parents, thank you for your patience and your vulnerability and your bravery for joining us today.
Yeah.
One of the great silver linings for parent education has been that more of you are joining for webinars like this, that in the past doing this in person was pretty tricky, and there might have been just a handful of you. But today we had a great group. So thank you. Special big thanks to Amanda LeBlanc and RTS for the wonderful work that you're doing. I know we'll see you again soon. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe, stay well, and take care. See you soon.